Welcome Jesse to the show.
Jesse!
Yay! Jesse Adamson, longtime friend of all of us here. He's an amazing guy. He's the head of business development for Sound Image right now, but with the last name of Adamson. I think he's been around audio most of his life.
He was born in a speaker cabinet, wasn't he?
Born under a bad sign.
Born into a bad sign. That's hilarious. Hey, Jesse, welcome. I guess we know your history. We know you well. You're friends of us for years. But I bet there's a bunch of people tuning in that maybe don't know your history. Can you tell us a little bit about where you come from? Just tell us your history. What do you got going on?
So I guess was a musician as a teenager, started kind of mixing friends bands in nightclubs and stuff like that. And then kind of got that sort of led into some kind of desire to build recording studios, I think around that time, because it was sort of before recording studios were a bad idea, when they still look like somewhere where you could actually work around music and potentially make money. Now it's kind of a little bit harder because the home studio thing just kind of went bonkers. So started a little construction company with a friend, and we kind of started building studios and doing sound isolation and stuff like that for nightclubs and whoever needed any kind of acoustic treatment of any sort, whether we knew what we were doing or not. We would try to convince them that we did. And then somewhere in there, my old man called me and asked me to come up and chase some resumes, I think, for his company, Adamson Systems Engineering. And I went up there to try and help him hire some people, and wound up being the drywall guy. After
drywall for his house or drywall for the
no I always tried to avoid the home construction project as much as I could, but I'd drive a bulldozer and stuff if it came to it when we were trying to build a factory. But anyhow, started renovating the offices or something is really how I wound up there. And then at some point kind of became like a sales guy or something, just chasing business. And we were a very small company around that time. I think we only had just a little over maybe $1 million in revenue or something. So, and then somewhere along the lines became the director of marketing and sales. And then after that became the vice president at Adamson. And then around 2013, I think I decided it was time to try something different and get away from the family business. And Brock and I were button heads or whatever. As you can imagine, family business politics are a desired flavor. And,
although you moved up that chain pretty quickly there.
So, and I left, and Dave Shadone and I had become friends in the early 2000s, somewhere around there, early mid 2000s. And so I started talking to him about what I could potentially do for Sound Image. And we dreamt up a business development role collectively, and it took it from there. And that's the current, the semi-current position.
Yeah. Semi-current in this particular industry, how it is right now.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, let's back up just a little bit. I mean, that's a fast version of your history. I think that a lot of people here, and part of the reason that we wanted to have you on was to get your perspective about kind of working with a business and turning a business into, and helping to turn a business into something, huge. But, you when you arrived on the scene with Adamson, it seems like maybe you didn't have any experience, right? You just showed up and were like,
I still don't have any experience. Trying to fake it this whole time, man.
That's not true. I mean, guys, if you don't know anything about Adamson, Jesse pulled together a team of people and really worked well with his father to develop a business to turn it into a worldwide brand name that prior to that was a known speaker company and was active in Europe quite a bit. But basically you and your father and the team that you pulled together, Jochen and Ben and a bunch of guys there, pulled that together and turned it into really a worldwide brand that it is now. So I think that people that are coming here maybe want to know like the evolution of that and how you helped to make that happen. Right.
Well, I think, you know, my old man, as you guys know him and some other people know him, he's a very blunt and straightforward character. So I find him charming. You find him charming, but there are some people that, you know, sometimes because of his blunt nature or whatever, he might rub a guy the wrong way or something. So I think that what the balance that I maybe brought to the company was that he was always very brilliant and he always had great technology and he always had a great vision and he was relentless in that vision, but he sometimes didn't appeal to the broad masses. You know what I mean? And not everybody loved his flavor or whatever. And I think that I was just maybe a softer personality that could ride the wave of the technology in a different way than he was, what he was providing to everybody. So along the way, I guess in my early days at Adamson, I mean, I got thrown in at a really young age too. I think by the time I was maybe 23 or 24, I was trying to manage our cash flow and, you know, and in those days we didn't have a purchasing person and we didn't have a shipping person and whatever. So I was like, you know, juggling all these balls, trying to figure out how to make this thing go in a straight line and get the orders out the door to make sure that we could, you know, make payroll in the early days, you know. And then it's, as you know, the Y18 was quite a beast of a PA in those days. It was big and bulky, so some people didn't like it, but the guys that did sure, you know, the guys that could wrangle it, let's say, they could really, you know, go somewhere with it. And it started to catch some momentum, which had a lot to do with, you know, meeting you guys. And in particular, you know, I met Jim Digby through James McCullough mixing In Excess on like a Mexican tour or something. I think we were doing, Jim. Yeah. And then he really liked the way the thing sounded and had mentioned to me at some point along the way in there, he was like, hey, you know, we might have something we could do together here coming up down the road, whatever. I had no idea what it was going to be or who it was going to be.
I think the more to that story point is I was so blown away by the sound of the box, and it was In Excess, you're right, and it may have been in Mexico. But then shortly after Mexico, I think we came up to Canada. Yeah. And I was so blown away by the sound of that box. I immediately called Pooch and I'm like, have you heard this Adamson box yet? And it was coincidental. He had just gone to a show. Somebody invited you, Pooch, I think, to a demonstration that weekend. Yep. And so we had both heard the box for the first time at the same time in Mexico and Texas. Well, Mexico and North Mexico. And then, and we were both blown away by it. And that was what started our fetching relationship with the box.
Yeah, I remember at one point I flew down to Corpus Christi to meet Pooch. And I think it was a ZZ Top show or something like that with Big House Sound had a Y18 system out there.
That's right.
And we went down, and who was mixing? It was I
think it was Bill Chappelle, wasn't it?
It was Bill Chappelle. You know what? I remember it was Bill Chappelle's first night on a digital console. Yes. I remember that because he was super nervous because he had to try and figure out how to operate a profile or whatever. And I don't know what year this was, like somewhere in the 2004 or 5 or something in that range, maybe. 6?
I think it was 2006.
6, yeah, okay. Yeah. And and so I also remember it wasn't a particularly great setup and none of those things. I think I left that place with my tail between my legs going, shit, this isn't going anywhere. But then talk to you a little bit more, and you, I think, could see the forest through the trees or whatever, and decided to give it a run. And I think we had really great luck. I remember at the beginning of that Minutes to Midnight tour cycle coming out and just thinking that the PA was, at that time in my life, it's still maybe one of the best sounding shows. It was incredible. It was really good.
You know, part of what I loved about the Y series and still love about Adamson in general is, you know, I like boxes that are quirky and have a thing about them. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I don't particularly like boxes that are, really, super linear all the way out.
Yeah.
I like them to have a character. I want them to be linear, but I like them to have a characteristic. And I just noticed right away the wave guide of Adamson was just super sweet and excellent. Yeah. Hey, Tater, when did you hear Adamson monitor wedges and stuff? When did that happen?
I didn't actually hear the Adamson monitor wedges at first. With Judas Priest, we were doing festivals in Europe. I want to say, Jesse might be able to correct me, right around the 2000. And the front of house guy, Martin, was having great shows with EML using a Y18 rig. So Jesse can probably tell the story better than me.
Yeah. I think we had just built when I first met you, we had just built the Y10 system. And I remember this is how crazy it is Brock and I had a demo system that we loaded in a box truck, and he and I drove it to Detroit together. And then there's a guy named Randy Frierson down in the Gulf. He had like half of an arena or something like that, and a small arena, like 180 degrees or something. He had like half the inventory, and so Brock and I brought this demo rig down there to cover the other side of the PA, and so we came and hung the system and everything for the show and drove it in and out ourselves.
That was the great thing. I mean, we were already on tour, but we weren't playing arenas. We were doing theaters and small arenas, and all of a sudden we have a show at the Palace of Auburn Hills in my hometown, and not every day you get the owner and the head guys of the speaker company bringing it down and helping you set it up and fly it. And
we were the only two employees at that
point. Right. And that was what always attracted me to Adamson and the way Jesse does business was even in Linkin Park later, when the factory in Port Perry was big and tons of employees, we still did an audio rehearsal there. They let us come in and do an audio rehearsal there, set up consoles and do a line check and all that stuff. So we always, even though they got bigger and bigger, we always maintained that small kind of family atmosphere. So it was always great. And I think Jesse was a big part of that.
Yeah, for sure.
And there's no denying the way that box sounded. I mean, it really made a huge difference to what we were trying to do.
Yeah, and then we always talk about in this, especially in this webinar, because it's about relationships. The box was amazing. There's no question. But what we kind of fell in love with, I think all of us here, was the people that we saw there. Jesse and Ben and Jochen and guys that were just wanted to make audio better, and that was really kind of what I think took us, attracted us to you. Jesse, how do you go from you and your dad driving a panel truck to Detroit to having 200 employees? You know what I mean? Like, how does that happen? Tell us a little bit how that happened.
It was a steep curve, man. There was in the early 2000s in there, I think we had back-to-back, maybe 3 years in a row where we had like 50-60% growth each year. And so, and that compounds and it makes it hard to manage. That was I think the trickiest part of growing that company for all of us was that, trying to maintain quality control and improve quality control. Because in the earlier days, we didn't, we used to build Kevlar speakers and put them on skids. And we could build like 8 at a time, to 8 woofers or something. We'd stick them on a skid with wet glue and we'd raise them up to the roof where the furnace, the heaters were on the roof to try and dry the glue so that we could send them over to the production line to install them inside a speaker, And clearly when you're doing things like that, your quality control is maybe not as advanced as what the industry likes to see these days, And so while we're growing in these leaps and bounds because we had a great product. And I think, around after about 3 or 4 years of that, that's probably around when I met you guys. The Linkin Park crew.
Yeah, right.
And it sort of, from there, you guys were a big part of the next phase of the growth because the show sounded fantastic and you were reputable it was a mainstream tour. Let's say we'd done, we had Simple Minds out on the road, and we had In Excess with what was the guy's name? Jim JD Fortune, I think, was the singer at the time, wasn't he?
Yeah, that's right. He was one of those early winners of the Pick a Singer TV show.
Yeah, I don't know how much information we're supposed to give about these kind of characters, but I remember some stories with that guy, man.
I do remember, the box was, at that period in time, it was so overwhelmingly different. And there's the discussion about what that did with Pooch and I in our relationship, and Tater with ML. But we started asking for it in places that didn't have it yet. And I think you came to Singapore because you did, for some strange reason, you had a kit in Singapore.
If we're going to talk about Singapore real quick, let's give a shout out to Kevin, who's one of them. What's the name of his company, Jesse?
Team 108. Kevin.
Team 108.
Team 108. Shout
one
out.
of the best distributors out there.
He knows how to take care of people. That's for
Sorry,
sure.
Jim. I didn't mean to interrupt you. We got to give Kevin a Team.
No, it's all right. I mean,
I think even Ricky Cook likes Kevin. For Team 108.
Awesome.
So, I don't know. I think that when I came out to Singapore with you guys on a couple different occasions. I think once we came to Indonesia, I remember, and that was one of the first E15 systems.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the paint was still wet on that rig when we hung it. But it was big. I remember that. And Bad Religion maybe was opening, something like that. And a stadium show. It was a weird thing. Yeah. Anyhow. But yeah, back to the initial question, I guess, is the challenges of that growth were, it was about building a team and trying to figure out how to improve quality control. And because Adamson, for those that don't know, Adamson is a fairly unique manufacturer, which I think you guys can confirm, which is that Brock has always been a guy that didn't believe in farming out all your technology and allowing your intellectual property to be out there. And he has an incredible drive to keep it that way, and I think over the years he started to cherry pick certain things. You start to realize that it doesn't make that much sense to machine this part that's worth $1 or something, and anybody else could do it, and it doesn't mess with your technology at all. But in the process of trying to press Kevlar cones and machine steel magnet cups and build wood boxes and press plastic molded parts and all these kind of things, you have a whole lot of crap going on, and you're trying to figure out how to streamline your manufacturing and improve the process and the flow. And
scaling that up just must be crazy. Like you went from putting 8 speakers up into a heater to having a whole line of speakers. Well, I think one of my favorite stories is you were telling me about, like, early on, as far as the, keeping track of where stuff is. Didn't like a sandwich get lodged in a box that you found like a couple years later?
Many years ago. There was I remember there was this is a Brock story. This is even prior to me.
Oh, okay.
There was some guys out on the assembly line putting together some wedges or something, and they shipped a system of wedges over to France in the middle of the summer. These French guys open up all their boxes at the other end, and they're like, what's that smell? And they're all sniffing each other's sandwiches or whatever, thinking that somebody stinks, and found like an old ham and cheese sandwich in the waveguide of one of the speakers or something along those lines.
And if a Frenchman is if a Frenchman is worried about what it smells like, it must have been really bad.
Totally. But again, I mean, I think that the company has grown in such, their company now, I say my company still sometimes, like I'm part of it because it's just a family name or whatever, but that company has grown in such huge leaps and bounds from those positions. I mean, I remember, just the lack of quality control in those days was incredible. And, guys like Ben Cabot was just a huge part of improving the systems and the overall quality control. And I originally, he was referred to me by a friend of ours, another French Canadian guy, and named Jacques Tessier. And Jacques sent him my way and said, "Oh, you guys will really get along," and blah blah blah. And I was looking for just a tour support guy, like a systems engineer, to help out in the field that was better at setting up systems than I was, and whatever else. And I learned a lot from him in that regard as far as becoming a better systems guy. He taught me a lot. And now I know nothing, just by the way, because I haven't done any of that in a very long time. And when I was any good at it, they were still analog mixing consoles and stuff like that.
So fast forward to you're now at Sound Image. Who was your first account at Sound Image, and how did that transition go? And
that was a funny story, actually.
Did your time at Adamson help that transition?
Yeah, I mean, I remember I called Jim, actually, because I always like to, and I had called you guys as well. And I was trying to get a hold of Jim, and he was real busy at the time. I remember he's like, "Hey, I got to call you tomorrow. Because there was a press release coming out that I was joining Sound Image. And I wasn't like fishing for the account. I just wanted to call and give a heads up to my friends that, hey, I'm going to be here. And if you ever want to come and talk to us or whatever, then please do. And I called Jim. He was busy, and he called me the following morning right after the press release came out. He's like, "Oh man, you just snuck in under the radar on that one, didn't you?" And that day, so it was my first official day, I think, at Sound Image. And Jim said, "Well, Pooch is really digging mixing on a VTX right now, and Sound Image has this big inventory of VTX." He said, "So there might be a conversation here." And I think within my first week at work, I think I brought home the Linkin Park account. And as an account manager for a touring company, I didn't even really, again, one of those things, I didn't really know what I was doing. I was kind of just thrown into the thing and going, "Oh, I can figure this out somehow," but I looked good because I brought in this big account with you guys.
You always look good
within 3 days or something like that. And I was like, doesn't always work. I haven't brought in a good account since. So
that's not true. No, but I mean, that is the power of relationships, right? That's why we're taught. Well, that's kind of why we're doing this webinar, is that, this business has all kinds of great equipment and whatever, but when it really comes down to it, it's about, who do I trust that backs me up and makes it happen? That all, backing that up just a little bit, that all came about because Linkin Park was doing consumer product JBL stuff. And Jim approached me and said, "Hey, these guys are interested in doing consumer JBL. JBL Pro approached us."
That's right. Yeah.
And I said, "Okay, let's try that."
They had a Bluetooth speaker or something that they had a sponsorship going on.
Yeah, that's right.
The other part of that, Pooch, though, is for me, it was really about the way to get to the best sound for the band. And I know that's what it was for you as well.
100%.
And we were chasing, I think there is a tendency in our business to pick an audio company and stay with that audio company. And not every type of music and every type of engineer fits every type of box. It's that the math doesn't work that way. And you and I identified early on that Adamson cabinet really made Linkin Park sound great. And you obviously made a great sound for Linkin Park. And then it's not that Adamson nothing had changed in the way that you were able to make that box sound for them, but then the VTX story took hold, and we did a shootout with the different ones, and the VTX ended up sounding better for Linkin Park. There wasn't a bad relationship at Clare Brothers. There wasn't a bad relationship at Adamson. For us, it was about what's going to make our client sound the best. Yeah. And unfortunately, a lot of people in our business chase the relationship over what's best for their client, and that's not good.
That's interesting. That's a really interesting take on it.
For me, the job was, how can I help to produce the best Linkin Park? And that's why we jumped from company to company. And that was that caused a huge rift between ML and I, and ML wouldn't succumb to ML. The box sounds best for the band. And that wasn't good enough.
That's a really great point. We're talking about a time period and where speaker technology was taking leaps and bounds in every 6 months was something new that was exciting. We went all to line array, and then all of a sudden within line array, there was these huge advances. And one of the things was, VTX and their D2 driver was amazing for all the sparkly bits. So it's a great point, Jim. We were chasing.
And if you
we were
remember,
doing
the
what
Y18
was right for our client.
Definitely.
Right.
And the Y18 was weak in that department too, if you recall. Remember, it had that big cancellation around 10K or something like that inside the sound chamber. And so when you filled in that hole and you had that new system that came with the VTX, it was a nice sounding PA. It still is a nice sounding PA.
Yeah, and it was also coverage too, because you'll remember the first version of line array that we were using, there were holes in coverage. You'd walk the whole arena and it would be, wow, it sounds amazing right here. And then one seat over, it was gone completely.
Yeah.
And when we came to Adamson, that full robust kind of coverage was back in the game for us, and there weren't any dead spots. And then VTX took that one step further.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. I think that's important to point out. And I liked your take on that, Jim, about the reverse part of that. Like, this is all about relationships, but not at the detriment of not making your clients sound good. That's what our jobs are, to make our clients sound good.
No, it was an honorable move, I think, by Jim in particular in those days, in the very early days with Linkin Park, because he really stood his ground with historic relationships on the line and all that kind of stuff. And he just stood firm and said, this PA kicks ass and I want to put it out there. And I don't care what anybody else says. If you don't want to give it to me, then I'm going to go and find it elsewhere, because this is the one that we want to use, And I think he and that was collectively with Pooch and Jim together, but Jim started that position right from the beginning when he had heard it,
And
absolutely. I mean, they were, sorry, Jim. Absolutely. There were, awkward moments with relationships for sure. But I always respected Jim for championing what was right for the client. You know what I mean? So it was like, he would say, let's go check out this box. I know it's good. And I couldn't disagree. I was like, you know what, this is a better box for this band. And so I'm going to have to go with it. And despite our relationships, we're going to have to fight for it. So,
yeah. And I remember at that time I was over in the UK to come, and you guys were playing the O2, and I'd flown over there and went to hang out with James Gordon and Dave Webster, of course, for a couple of days. They just beat my brains out for a bit.
We aren't going to talk about any of that. But anyway,
we won't get into the great details of what happened to you and I in that Holiday Inn. But the point was that I was at Digico, and they had, at that time, it had to be 2007 or maybe late 06, because they were in the process of releasing the SD7 at that time, and that was in 2007.
You brought an SD7 to the show, right? We looked at it
I brought a prototype of the thing. But back to ML, who I didn't know. I don't think I ever even met ML in person. Talked to him on the phone a couple of times, but he was, at this point, was not a huge fan of me because of the fallout with Linkin Park or whatever. And so I went to the UK, and I went and picked up Pab, and Pab came over to hang out at Digico with me to see this SD7. We both went to see it together or something like that, and we went and did the demo, and then we brought the demo console over to you guys. But ML had called while we were at Digico, and I remember Pab was laughing because he knew how much ML wasn't very happy with me at that point in time, and he answered the phone. He's like, "Oh yeah, I'm just over here sitting at Digico with Jesse Adamson." And you could just see Pab's face. He's just like smiling from ear to ear because he's just poking at him a little bit,
Poking the bear. Yeah.
Funny.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
So it's funny too, because I don't know if you recall, but then that relationship, all of that story went full circle back to Claire again. Yeah. When their most recent line array, and the name, I've just been searching for the name, I can't think of it. What is it?
Cohesion.
Cohesion.
12, yeah.
When Cohesion came out, because at that point in time, we were suffering from some artist feedback about who was very unhappy with the amount of sound on stage. And the Cohesion had this magical power to make almost 0 dB behind it. Yeah. And we had to come all the way back around because that became the priority at that point in time.
Yeah.
Well, I think the point is, go ahead.
Go ahead, Pooch.
I was just saying that I think that the point is that no matter what, the clients that we work for are the most important in trying to get the best sound for them. I know that's the reason that Tater made the choice to use Adamson wedges, right, Tater? I mean, you could have used whatever wedges you wanted to use, right?
Yeah, but a lot of that was early on. If you remember that club that we played on the I guess it would have been the promo side of the Minutes to Midnight tour. We did some warm-up shows in Europe, I think. And
there was a Y10 system for you, Pooch. I remember that.
Y10 and Yoke, and that was the first when I met Jochen.
Yeah.
You know, it was still, I'd only done one tour with Linkin Park before that in Japan in 2006. And then this was the start of the new record cycle with Minutes to Midnight. And the back line guys were really the ones that said Jochen had brought wedges with him to that club, and they were blown away by it. And, you know, I was probably lost in just getting everything together for that day. And, you know, and then when I went and really had to listen to them, I was like, wow, these actually sound fantastic.
That's the most underrated wedge, that Adamson double 12. Not very many people spec it, and there's not very many of them out there and whatever, but that wedge is absolutely crushing. It's a great wedge.
I've got a whole bunch in my shop behind me if anybody wants to run them. Throw a little shout out. But yeah, it was just great sounding wedges, and I got to say that they worked good. You know, we were underhanging them under the stage when we were carrying stages, on top of the stage, wherever we needed to put them. They were just fantastic sounding boxes.
I mean, you liked them so much, you bought them, right?
Yeah, there you go. I guess that's a testimonial right there.
So, I mean, that says something, right? You know, you got to a point where you dug them so much that you needed it.
Yeah, definitely. But going back to relationships, I got to say, thinking back when you guys were talking about that, Jesse, I think, and you got to remember, there's a gap there between companies, store-bought equipment that came on later on because every company had their own boxes. So I'd say in the early 2000s, when companies were using, Adamsons and JBLs and not producing their own boxes, to me, Jesse was the first face of a manufacturer to see them. You know what I mean? He put a face with the company where I didn't know anybody from. If you knew somebody from another company, it was through a middleman or something else. Here was an actual guy working in that company that had vested interest in it. Not only that, he was taking time to hang out and be with you and help you. And Jesse really put a face on that for me. And I think that's probably why the relationship has lasted so long, even to this day.
You know, speaking of faces, I just realized Evan McElhaney, who's in the audience today.
Yeah.
That's how we ended up.
First systems engineer, right? On Linkin Park. Yeah,
that's right. They had a company up in Maine, of all places.
Vermont.
Atomic Audio.
That was the first place Jesse was able to position the boxes in the States, and they produced mostly weddings. So suddenly, the next thing you knew, Adamson was forcing them to own a bunch of boxes, and we were renting from them. I remember it was a fantastic relationship.
And along came Evan.
That
was his first
He now mixes monitors for Styx, and he's the badass.
He's a super badass. Yes, he is.
Great dude.
Yeah, I mean, that was amazing. It was a small little company in Vermont. And they, all of a sudden, Jesse's like, guess what? You're doing Linkin Park, and we're going to ship you a bunch of boxes.
Well, that was a strange thing, because you remember it was like a chain of companies to pull that whole thing together, right? It was officially an audio analyst's audio account.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
And audio analysts had to cross hire the PA from those guys.
Right.
Because they, at the time, for whatever reason, they didn't believe that there was going to be, and we were all telling them, Jim was telling them, you were telling them, there's a ton of work. I mean, we're at the beginning of an album cycle. It's going to go, and this is what we want. But they didn't want to invest or something in those early days. And then they got sold to Solitech shortly thereafter anyway. So, the point was that they were bringing the PA in from those guys, and I was selling the PA to those guys, and they were cross hiring it, and it was a very hodgepodgey kind of thing, but we pulled it off.
We sure did.
It worked.
Yeah. When so we keep going back to relationships, and relationships is what this is all about. And so speak to us a little bit, Jesse, about. I mean, I honestly think that is the reason that you were able to dramatically increase the sales at Adamson, was because you were how often were you flying? Like every day going to visit people, or what?
Yeah, it was a nasty run there for a little while. I think I was doing about 150,000 miles a year or something, but not in the same way that when you guys go on tour and do your thing. It was like out to a thing and then back to the shop for a day or two because I had to deal with whatever internal crap was going on, and then over to China and
50 miles at a time.
Yeah, exactly. I was it was killing me, but but on the relationship side, the thing that you were saying before, Tater, about how I was maybe one of the first guys that you can remember really trying to put a face to it or something like that. I think there's a unique situation there as well, which is that not every manufacturer has the family name on the offsprung. You know what I mean? So you can't. It was like you said, there's a weird vested interest because it's my family, and it's kind of a small company that's on the rise. So it had. I was lucky in a lot of ways because I could open doors in ways that maybe another sales guy, for instance, wouldn't have been able to open so easily because I just had the family name. So someone would assume that I kind of know what I'm doing, whether I did or not. So it allowed me access to people in a way that someone else may have had to work harder to build or get those doors open or something like that. And I was just able to do it naturally because of the fact that I had the name. So I had that as a gift in my corner kind of thing. And but I did, however, I think put a lot of energy into it as well. I more so than a lot of other manufacturers that I watched or was competing with. I always saw that I was out trying to really maintain the relationships, and you could call my mobile phone at 4 a.m. and I was on it and trying to sort things out because I was young and hungry we felt that we were building the best PAs out there. We thought that our PA was the best PA in the world, and we wanted to make sure that everybody knew it. And therefore, we knew we didn't have the support of Claire or Sound Image or, one of these bigger companies behind the product at that time. We were working with smaller companies and stuff. So we had to put in the extra time to help support it ourselves as well. And then and as we're doing that, we were growing our team. Remember, we hired Ewan McDonald as well from Australia out of Norwest, and that guy was a monster. He was great to have on our team. And when you started to button all that together with Ewan and Ben and Johan, those guys were just, and then David, who now works for L Acoustics, or was working for L Acoustics the last time I spoke with him. Those guys, that whole team of people was just fantastic, and so it wasn't just me out there trying to do it. We were all like 30 or something, and we all wanted to win. Every one of us was like, hey, let's go out and whoop everyone else's ass. So we had this energetic young team that had a lot of, one of the things that I give my old man credit for is he used to say to me, he goes, we don't hire racehorses, we hire donkeys and we teach them to run fast. You know what I mean? So he would he would always he would give these opportunities to guys like myself or Johan or Ben or whatever. We're young people, we don't have a lot of experience in business, and we're holding fairly high positions within the firm. And I think that gave us this very hungry young management team, and I think we grew out of that. And after I left, they continued with it and had some more great people on the team and continued to take it from where we had gotten it to and
it continues today, right? I mean, look at where some of these people that have touched, the team that you put together, some of these people are right now, you and Ricky Cook, all these guys. Sorry,
K-Bob.
Tater. Yeah. Paul Bauman. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like huge dudes in this industry who do amazing work were all kind of assembled at this time. It was almost like it seems like it was a perfect storm of what was going on. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And Bernie Broderick was in there as well.
Oh,
He
yeah.
went off to L Acoustics after, and then he went to EAW. And I mean, there's a lot of great talent that has passed through that building. And Brock is a fantastic mentor, but he's also he suffers no fool. So you can't go in and fake it and, fly by the seat of your pants if you don't have strategy and if you're not willing to roll up your sleeves and fight and work hard and admit your own mistakes. He's also a guy that he doesn't like you to look in the mirror in the morning and go, man, did you do a good job yesterday, and pat yourself on the back. He likes you to look in the mirror in the morning and be like, you dumb fucker, go and do a better job. You know what I mean? So but it gets the most out of the people, you know? And I think that every one of us that has worked there and maybe left pissed off or whatever might have happened, or left in a good mood, whatever it is, but everybody that I ever talked to is like, man, I learned more from Brock in the 5 years that I worked there or whatever it was than anybody else has ever taught me, because he's such an incredible, I mean, you guys know what he's like. He's difficult, but he's brilliant, you know?
Well, he's the guy, when you want to talk about audio, he's the guy that you want sitting at the table. I mean, the guy's, you know, he's brilliant when it comes to that.
That depends. If you want to pretend you know what you're talking about, you may not want him sitting at the table. But, yeah,
that's for sure. That's for sure.
I'll say something about Brock. I remember him telling me, and I think it was in catering at that 2001, that Judas Priest show?
Yeah, I think so.
I remember him trying to tell me about end firing subs and putting them all in a line and doing them different patterns and all this stuff. And that wasn't, you know, it wasn't done back then. He was trying to explain it to me, a monitor guy, to try to keep the sound off the stage. And I'm, you know, can't keep up with Brock by any, you know, stretch of the imagination. And he was explaining all that stuff to me. I was, you know, years later, here it is. It's here, and it came to life. So
totally. And
he definitely had some good visions.
Yeah, he often has. I've found working with him for so many years, he often has a vision that's contradictory to what everybody else is doing, whatever the trend is doing. You know, I remember in the late '90s, after that, what was that? Was it Turbo Sound that built that 21-inch sub?
Yes.
In the '90s. Yeah, that thing, and it wasn't particularly well received, that box, known to be a little bit slow and sludgy feeling or something like that. And the Brock in those times was telling me, oh, I've got this vision of building this dual coil, dual spider, crazy motor 21-inch woofer. And I remember thinking all the time, whenever he was talking about it, nobody wants that, you know, everybody likes 18s and blah 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 blah. And then started to learn a little bit more about how, you know, the motor strength works with a loudspeaker system, and started to see what his vision looked like. And then we came out with that T21 sub, which still to this day, for me, it's my favorite sub that's ever been. It wasn't my favorite to lift, and nor was it my favorite to service. But and I don't think as a company it did huge things for Adamson, but did we ever actually make any money from that speaker? Probably not, because we could barely get the thing to stay together, you know what I mean?
Right.
Ben and I did the first demo of that thing. I remember we got one prototype working of this T21 box, and it wasn't even painted. It was just a plywood box held together with Velcro and bubble gum, basically. And we had it working, and Brock right away, we had some partners over in France who are still partners in the company. You know, they always helped us with preset development. Didier and those guys. I think
Didier and DV2, right? Yeah.
Didier and Guy, and they great guys. You know, anyway, and a huge part of the Adamson momentum, because they had broken into the French market and Belgium and all that stuff. Soon as we had this one working prototype, Brock's on the phone with those guys. He's like, hey, you guys got to get over here. They got a working one. You got to come and hear this thing. And Ben and I was going, no, man, no, don't do this to us. And I remember there's no grill on it, nothing. It's just like a plywood box with Bondo and shit all over it. And we set it on the loading dock when these guys show up, and we put a little bit of like low level music through it, and with like 2 Y18 stacked on top of it or something like that. We turn it on, and it's like kind of cool. And then Didier had like an Alesis SR16 or something, you know, like a drum machine with like a couple pads on it or something.
Right.
And he sets this thing up, and he's like, we're listening to music. He goes, okay, turn that off. And and Ben and I are just looking at each other, because he's about to start using this drum machine. He pushes the fader up, and we're just looking at each other, and he hits one kick drum on the drum machine, and speaker just explodes, you know what I mean? Like the lead wires break, the dust caps fly off, all the foam shoots out of the ports, the whole thing just completely falls apart on the loading dock. And Ben and I are just sitting there deadpan, like, oh god, because they just flown over from Paris, right?
Yeah.
And So we stayed up all night, Ben and I, gluing this thing back together to get it to work again. And the following day did a successful demo with it. You know?
Wow.
That's
Let me
nuts,
show
man.
you how I can disassemble your cabinet.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You know what's so funny as we start telling all of these stories, I realize how many minutes or how many times you and I have been in like weird things like that where, you know, the stuff is like literally being held together with bubble gum. Didn't you? Wasn't the first like E15 you drove down to Cleveland? Was it Cleveland?
The prototype E15 system we built. We had epoxy waveguides. We made all these epoxy waveguides, and Ben and Ewan, Jochen, and Didier and Didier wasn't helping us, but he showed up to come and help us try and build a preset because we had somehow gotten our hands on another competitor's system, which was all the rage at that moment, and we wanted to hang the E15 beside theirs.
You guys are audio pirates, man. You guys are audio pirates.
Absolutely. We used to rip everybody's stuff to pieces. Ben and I would just take it to bits, and we would know how much distortion, how much power compression, thermal efficiency, everything about a system. We would know it inside and out. And then we would do our best to try and build something that could outperform whatever we thought the next best thing was. Anyhow, we built these waveguides out of epoxy, and then we had these prototype speakers and whatever, and we built, I think it was a dozen boxes, and we assembled the whole thing on the assembly line, and all the epoxy, as it cured, expanded a little bit too far, so you couldn't connect any of the rigging together. And it's like, I don't know, 7 p.m. and we've got a demo the next day in Cleveland with this PA that we don't have a preset for, we don't have nothing, you know what I mean? And so we had to take the whole thing apart. We had grinders, like palm sanders and angle grinders, and we had to grind off the edges of all of those sound chambers and reinstall them back into the PA and glue and screw the whole thing back together to get the rigging to fit. And then we stuck it on a box truck again and drove it down to Cleveland.
And then I met you guys at a gig where it was a sound off where you guys hung one side and then another manufacturer was hung on the other side.
Exactly.
And it wasn't even for my gig. I was there kind of to be the middleman. And you know,
and the thing was that Tom Arco from Eighth Day had invited all these engineers and stuff too. If you remember, there's got to be like 25 kind of pretty heavy hitting engineers, like Tim Colvard was there. He was there at all these people. And we had to go and hang beside one of the leading systems out in the market. And we had to make our preset that morning while it was hanging in the air or whatever.
Dude, right. you pulled up in the truck and you like pulled me aside and you're like, dude, I don't know if this is going to work. We basically just kind of threw this together and we're going to see what happens.
And like, what was the end result?
You know, I mean, I would say that pretty well everybody there was like the preset needs a little work to smooth it out. But as far as the overall, I mean, horsepower was night and day. You know what I mean? The E15 was just had a ton of headroom in it. And it just wasn't a refined preset yet. And, you know, when you're working through your crossover points and the alignment of the way the Adamson sound chamber works with the 3 slots and overlap at the crossover and everything to smooth everything out, you have to get that part right, or else you don't have a very smooth horizontal pattern. Whereas the other system was a refined preset and whatever else. So the horizontal pattern, I thought, from them outperformed what we were doing, but the overall horsepower and the sonic characteristic of the box. And at that time, again, we were still putting T21 subs under it versus their dual 18, which in my opinion were not on the same page. So you had this it was a good shootout, let's say.
I thought we
did well.
For the fact that there was no preset and you literally had just finished gluing the boxes together, you know, like I remember us, I have a distinct memory of us both looking at each other being like, wow, I think this sounds
Should we be hanging that thing? Yeah. Should be hanging that thing. Yeah. I've been in that position.
Did you take any more relationships like the Linkin Park one to Sound Image from Adamson? Was there any more of those out there?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of engineers that I had known along the way. Like John Lemon was an engineer that I had met doing shows I think he had discovered the Adamson stuff with EML on Rock Werchter, and he then somehow we had met. I don't know, maybe Patrick Demoustier from EML or somebody like that had introduced us, and he started mixing on shows, and I went out on tour with him for not a tour, but I used, like I would with you guys in the early days, come out and do 3 or 4 shows at a time and make sure the system was being set up to the best of its ability and all that kind of stuff. And I went and did a bunch of Smashing Pumpkins shows with John Lemon on Y-axis stuff down in South America or Mexico or something like that. That was also a part of the world where I would often fly down when I had accounts that I thought were starting to like our stuff. I'd be like, uh-oh, they're going to do 8 shows in a row in Mexico on a Y18 rig. I better get in there and make sure that it doesn't turn into into guacamole.
It's funny how things come back around. I remember those doing Rock Werchter and all those, and EML being the supplier, and they always had their custom wedges there, which I never had to use because I was always carrying some. EML did me a great favor one year when a power supply on my console broke, and they brought some in from somewhere else. And it's just funny though, now 20 some years later, I'm using EML wedges on Iron Maiden. It's just funny how that circle comes back around. Like, who would ever thought?
Comes back around.
Yeah.
I mean, I think one of the things that's interesting, I remember about using Adamson with you, Tater, was having the same kind of sound signature on the stage with those wedges, along with what was coming out of the front. That helped our relationship, right?
Great point. Yeah.
You
great
noticed
point.
that.
Definitely.
Well, and I think Jesse mentioned something too that may be an understated importance, and that is, those festivals are an opportunity. If you've got a new product or you're trying to break in, getting your PA on a festival that many of the headline artists get to come through. That's a great way to get known and get heard.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, I think with like my relationship with Anthony King, with John Lemon, with Pooch, with a lot of these guys, like really solid mixers, Pab, every one of them, it all kind of stemmed from big European festival rigs. And then they heard the stuff, and then I would try and, if I heard that they liked it, Robbie McGrath, I remember he was a big fan when he got on it. Like lots of guys around, where I would just kind of start communicating with them afterwards and try and keep the conversations alive to see if there were ways to get more stuff going. And I think that it transitioned into Sound Image, where a lot of those relationships, I tried to still maintain them and bring them over, though some people along the way that you meet are just, they're dyed in the wool with another company or whatever it is. And you still, I think the key thing to take away is that you never know when you might run into someone again down the road or whatever. And I think if you treat everybody with, a certain amount of respect and a certain amount of integrity in the business that you do with them and so on, then you hopefully carry a strong reputation with you along the way. And you can move from artist to artist or from company to company, and people will tend to keep an open mind to whatever it is that you're doing next. And that's what I tried to do coming into Sound Image, was to keep all my relationships and bring them over and then meet new ones, And if someone likes you, I mean, people like to do business with people they like. And so, if Pooch and I are friends and I say, hey, Pooch, can you introduce me to so-and-so? I'm going to try and do a speaker demo or whatever when I was still at Adamson. Pooch would be like, of course, we should call these guys and these guys and these guys and get them out there. And you back each other and you try to help and move things forward. So.
Absolutely. We got about 5 minutes here left, guys. Also, hey, everybody that's out there listening still, if you have any questions, remember we do the after question and answer thing. Throw some last minute questions here in this last 5 minutes. Jesse, a couple of more things. What do you see with Sound Image or with yourself? Like, where do you see, besides COVID, let's not talk about COVID, but after COVID, when we all go back to work, like, what is the future of this business? Like, what do you see? You're always an innovator. It seems like you're looking ahead.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that the obvious thing has been the consolidation of so many companies over the last decade, you know what I mean? Where you just have seen a lot of the smaller, there are only a few sort of top tier touring companies left, let's say, because they've been, you know, absorbed by another one or picked up. And I think that to survive in the major, on the big stage, let's say, as a company these days, you kind of have to look at how you're covering the globe and how you're taking care of your clients in a solid way on both sides of the pond, for instance. And I think that if you don't pay attention to that, then you kind of become history at some point. You know, it's something you have to. I think it's a pretty obvious statement, but it, you know, it is.
Would right now be a good time to give a shout to our guest next week, since Jesse kind of led into it a little bit.
Shadoni.
Yeah. So our guest next week is Dave Shadone, who is the owner of Sound Image. And I guess he's kind of your boss, isn't he?
He's not kind of my boss. He's fully my boss. I've been trying to take his chair from him since I got there, but he just won't let go of the thing. Dave is great. He's one of my favorite people in the world, and he's and I thank you guys again for having me on, as well as having Dave on coming up, because it's great to get out and see some faces.
I mean, we feel Dave's another relationship guy, and he also was a mixer, so we felt be perfect for our format we have going on here, and we thank him for taking the time.
And he's one of the owners of one of the biggest sound companies in the US. He probably has a unique perspective on what's going on right now and what the future is, and all this kind of thing. So we're looking forward to that next week for sure.
Yeah. Good luck getting a word in.
I know, definitely. That's
a special 4-hour edition next week.
Yeah. He's the greatest storyteller on earth, I think, maybe.
Yeah, we're just gonna let him go. Speaking of stories, kind of as the last thing here, what's the best story you have about either me or Tater in our journey together that doesn't include something that is going to incriminate us?
The stories that I have about you, Pooch, my favorite ones, I think, are probably for a restricted audience. It's not a PG-13 kind of thing.
Are there any around a good bowl of pho? Is that what it is?
Yeah, exactly.
We've had some good meals together.
Good Korean barbecue.
We've had some good meals together for sure.
Yeah.
How about the old Tater? You got any stories about the old Tater?
Tater and I have just been friends so we haven't actually hung out that much, though. I mean, in person, we spent
I just stayed at his house for a week.
Yeah, well, there. Yeah, my dog likes him more than me. She won't come near me, but she loves
in Singapore.
Oh boy, yeah.
We were already talking about Kevin.
Yeah, those are all stories we can't tell either. We can't tell those stories about Singapore. But anyway, thanks a lot for coming, guys. We really appreciate it. And a special thanks to you, Jesse. Thank you for taking the time to come talk to us.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, man. And don't forget, next week is Dave Shadone. Come on, check us out. And thanks a lot for coming, guys. See ya.
Thank you.